Hello and welcome to episode 53 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. For this episode, we're watching Marie Antoinette, written and directed by Sofia Coppola, whose latest movie, The Beguiled, is in theaters now and just won her the Best Director award at Cannes. While I'm a fan of the Sofia Coppola movies I have seen, I have never seen Marie Antoinette, and Ryan hasn't seen it since it was in theaters over 10 years ago, so the time seemed right to take a little trip to France.
Marie Antoinette was pretty highly anticipated since it was Coppola's follow-up to the much-acclaimed Lost in Translation. The critics' responses were fairly tepid, mostly admiring Coppola's unique style and her coupling of modern sensibilities with the historic setting. It only earned one Oscar nomination and win for Best Costume Design. Over time, however, it seems that Marie Antoinette keeps popping up in discussions of filmmaking and examples of technical prowess.
So does Marie Antoinette deserve to be examined more closely to find substance beyond the style?
Or is this movie in over its head, a little like the Queen herself? Keep listening.
To the Dauphin and Dauphine of France, may you have many healthy children and produce an heir to our throne.
All right, so that was a clip, a very short clip, shorter than the clips we usually do here, from the movie we're discussing in this episode, Marie Antoinette. That is not Marie Antoinette
That
speaking.
wasn't her, no.
That was Louis XV, who is the king at the moment in there. That's at the wedding of Marie Antoinette with his son, Louis the 16th.
Yeah.
We know math.
Yep.
Really one of the few points in the movie where you're going to get plot.
Yeah.
So it's him basically saying what the real crux of the story
that's kind
is
of the biggest
that,
issue.
that she needs to produce an heir. And she comes from Austria to marry this,
Right.
into this French family,
And
royal
even
family.
that plot point being the most major plot point is
Maybe,
much
yeah,
only
it's-
emblematic. It's
Right.
sort of a microcosm rather than actually a problem we're worried about.
It's
in a
more
sense.
it's more just sort of the purpose of her being there as far as plot goes.
Yeah.
Like that's why she's there, is to produce an heir,
Right.
and form a stronger alliance between Austria and France.
right. Every girl's dream.
Yeah.
So, like we said in the intro, Nate, you have not seen this movie.
No, well, I mean, I have obviously
You have now.
but
Thank
beforehand,
goodness.
no.
So you don't really have a story. Do you have a story as to why you didn't see it?
No, not really. I had seen Virgin Suicides. I had seen Lost in Translation. Love both those movies. I don't know why I didn't see Marie Antoinette. I think it was just one of those that I didn't catch in the theater, and it like we said in our intro, it wasn't met with real high acclaim, really, and it just was one that I never really picked up. Even though I do really like historical, period pieces.
Yeah, and I don't traditionally. So the modern kind of twist on
Piqued
it,
your interest.
yeah, that drew me to it. I'm very glad we're talking about this movie, but I hearing you just say the words "The Virgin Suicides," I'm like, man, I almost wish we were talking about that movie because I love that movie so much.
Okay. I've only seen it once, and it was a long time ago. But I mean,
I've seen it so many times.
I've listened to the soundtrack because of the
that's
Air.
an amazing
the
soundtrack,
French band
yeah.
Air did the soundtrack, and it's an amazing soundtrack.
And the French band Phoenix has done most of her movies since then. She likes French musicians, which is great.
And French stuff, I
Yeah,
guess.
apparently, real Francophile.
That's yeah.
Virgin Suicides, I think, is amazing. And if you revisit it, Sofia Coppola predated Instagram by, almost 10 years. But like
Just with the way
1999,
the filters,
the
you mean?
filters, the framing, like the title sequence, everything about it is what became popular in the last 5 years. And I think that's incredible that she's got that sort of sense of taste and style.
Well, we mentioned in
That's
our last
so far
episode that
ahead.
she just makes cool movies, is kind of the way we put it. And And I think we can get into in our episode what we really kind of mean by that, maybe. But
Right.
I don't have a better way to say it than I just think personally, I just think her movies are so cool.
Yeah.
And she's got a sense of cool. Like, it's not cool that it doesn't ever seem to date itself. Like,
No.
Lost in Translation still feels just as fresh when you watch it now as you maybe did back in 2003.
My interest in Sofia Coppola actually began with the Virgin Suicides. Funnily enough, we were like, my friends and I were at the movie theater in 1999 when Virgin Suicides came out, and we were being like good little judgmental Christians and saw the poster that just said the Virgin Suicides, and we're like, look at that sinful movie. And then maybe like 2 years later, I was into movies in a big way and heard that was good. And I was like, all right, I'll watch it. And like, it blew me away. And
funny how corrupting the movies have been to you.
Right. Up until that point, judging movies by their titles had really worked out for me. And so anyway, Virgin Suicides blew me away. I was like a huge Sofia Coppola fan and was bummed there wasn't anything else. And then Lost in Translation came out. Super excited to see that. Saw that in theaters. Loved it. Saw that a bunch of times. And so when Marie Antoinette was coming out,
you were excited.
I was amped because I just loved Sofia Coppola's movies.
She could do no wrong up to that point.
She had done no wrong.
Yeah. Maybe Godfather 3, but that's neither here nor there.
That actually plays into what I think about Marie Antoinette.
Well then hold that thought.
So we'll hold that thought. But so the trailer comes out, the first trailer with the Strokes song, and it's just like, yes. I was like, this is going to be the movie that makes me like period movies, even though I hadn't like really formulated in my mind that there's something about them that turns me off. Super excited. Came out, saw it in theaters right away. And I liked it, but I wasn't like floored by it because it didn't really, I don't feel like it necessarily delivered on the style that was promised in the trailer in the way I expected it to, which is not really anybody's fault but mine, maybe. So anyway, I liked it.
But you were kind of like the critics, maybe a little lukewarm on it.
Yeah. Well, because it is pretty different from Lost in Translation and Virgin Suicides.
In some ways. In some ways, not at all.
Right.
Yeah.
I know. That's also part of what I want to talk about. But I never saw it again.
Yeah.
Not like with Virgin Suicides and Lost in Translation that I watched over and over and over again.
And what about subsequent Coppola movies? Did she rebound at all for you? Like, I mean, I'll be honest, I never saw The Bling Ring. I never saw...
I did not see The Bling Ring.
Somewhere was, I think, the other one she did, right?
I didn't see The Bling Ring, so I can't speak to that. I did see Somewhere, and it was okay. But maybe I should watch it again. I watched A Very Murray Christmas.
That one was, I thought, pretty terrible. Did you like that?
I
couldn't even get through it.
I
thought it was awful.
I didn't enjoy it.
We're talking about the Bill Murray Christmas special on Netflix, directed by Sofia Coppola.
I thought there was some good parts to it.
Maybe I'll give it another chance.
I mean, I don't know what you were expecting.
I just didn't think it was funny at all.
It certainly wasn't that. Whatever you were expecting.
I was expecting to laugh a little bit,
wasn't
and I was
that.
like, all these jokes seem to be falling so flat.
Yeah. But I still hold Sofia Coppola very highly in my esteem. So Marie Antoinette, I found I didn't rate it on Letterboxd.
Okay.
I probably would have given it like a 3.5.
Okay.
And watching it again, I just bumped it up to a 4.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. What did you rate it?
I am going to rate this a really strong 4 stars, but like really strong to where I'm kind of, I just finished watching this last night. I'm still kind of settling with it. I love this movie.
Yeah, my 4 is really solid.
But I feel like, there might be a few things here and there, but I love the movie to the point where I could see if it hangs with me for the next few days, that I could totally bump this up to a 5-star movie.
Yeah.
Because it even has so far.
5-star, really?
I think so, because even just going through, before we met here, I was, kind of getting the movie prepped up on my computer, and just, going through the timeline of the movie, and every single freeze frame is something you could just put up on your wall.
Yes.
Like, I know that's not enough to make a 5-star movie, but like, it is so visually memorable to me.
Yep.
And that to me is, it can be the difference between just a really solid movie and if the movie has like characters that are interesting, and it's bringing you into this, experience really well. And it does that with the language of film in a way only film can do. And I have a personal reaction to that.
Right.
Then that's like a 5-star movie.
For a movie to be so immersive,
yes,
and so anachronistic is really a difficult thing to do.
Really? Well, I was going to ask you because I wanted to know. I think if anybody's been listening here for a while, they know about your apprehension towards period dramas.
Historical, sure.
Now, would you say it's because in general they can be, would you say, like stale, stuffy, dry? Is that what you're kind of getting at when you have a problem with them? Or you're just bored by them?
And tipping my hand a little bit, it's one of the reasons I think I like Marie Antoinette quite a bit. I think oftentimes those movies tend to be like really excited to appease history buffs. Like, I wonder how they're going to show this.
Sure.
Like whose interpretation?
And they're just sort of checking off the boxes of what happened.
Yeah.
And you're seeing what their interpretation of that thing was.
And I feel like I've said before, I don't like movies that are essays. And that could be a movie that's an essay that's like a persuasive essay and has like this very strong thesis that's irritating, or a movie that's just an essay reporting on a historical event. And a lot of those historical movies tend to err that way rather than maybe trying to do something new with narrative. Or
I think it helps to know what exactly you tend to not like about them, and then to see if her sort of poppy, almost teen beat take on on Marie Antoinette would work, or
it's a little reductive.
If the sort of you know what I mean. I just mean like that's all. I mean, I think that's pretty explicit in it. I'm not trying to say that's all the movie is. I just think that her style of it is definitely there. The anachronisms, the more coming of age tale in it, and it does have the. I mean, you don't have an "I Want Candy" montage and not think teen beats. I mean, come on.
Right. You're right. Sorry for being defensive.
Yeah, I didn't know if. What I didn't know is if that would actually play into your annoyance, if that sort of fetishizing of decadence would almost make it more insufferable for you.
Yeah, I still think
there's
it
the
had
costumes
such good
and all the
style.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into it.
We will anyway. And so I think it goes without saying, I'm very excited that The Beguiled is getting such good reviews, and that her directing is getting first woman to win the award at Cannes since I don't.
But it's not without its detractors for very specific reasons, which I think also.
It's always the way with Cannes.
Well, I know, but it's also.
Like, no, I know.
I don't know if you've read any of the stuff on The Beguiled. There was a Slate piece in particular about Sofia Coppola's whitewashing in it, which I thought was. Saying this, having not seen it, I thought was pretty unfair. To be fair, I listened to a Film Spotting episode where Josh Larson and then a guest co-host, Angelica Jade Bastien, who is African American, who also said it was an unfair article, and sort of made a lot of good points that I kind of had the same feeling of, having not seen the movie, and was like, okay, that kind of confirms what I didn't like about the article. But you can read it yourself. It's a Slate article called Lost in Adaptation, about The Beguiled by Corey Atad. And the reason I'm bringing it up here, even though we haven't seen that movie, is because he actually says it's sort of a feature of all of her movies, that she whitewashes in all of her movies. The tagline under the article is Sofia Coppola's The Beguiled cuts the book's black characters, which is true. There are black characters actually in the book and in the Clint Eastwood movie from the 70s that are just changed to white characters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Cuts the book's black characters, whitewashing its tale of the Civil War era South. At this point, that's hardly a surprise, is what he says.
Oh, that's interesting. I want to see that movie still.
Me too. Yeah.
And I may or may not want to read that article. But I think that actually segues nicely into talking about Marie Antoinette, because I think one of the things that is the strength of this movie is its point of view. And I think it's that she doesn't step outside her point of view that makes this such a successful movie. That she doesn't try to take on the whole of the French Revolution. She doesn't try to take on the whole of French aristocracy. She takes it from the perspective of a teenage girl.
She takes what would be the obvious story of Marie Antoinette and kind of just cuts it out.
Right. It's in the background. Like literally, it's almost just sound background most of the time. But because we're so clearly aware of who Marie Antoinette is, the movie is as effective as it is. And I don't think you have that without Sofia Coppola going from her point of view and her perspective.
And it's safe to say, I think, we can definitely say this is her point of view. She did. I mean, it was based on a book,
right?
But this is her script, her vision. This is certainly, if you're going to apply a tour theory to anything, you could probably apply it to this movie.
Yeah. Well, and if you're going to apply a tour theory to any director, Francis Ford Coppola's daughter is probably a good place to start. But
good point.
She optioned a biography that humanized Marie Antoinette a little bit more. So I think she could have gone with a pile of facts, and she still would have probably come up with this story told this way. But the point of view that we get is, obviously it's Marie Antoinette's. It starts with everything about the movie, the opening credits with that like punkish pink, like.
Well, and it starts with visually, and it's really interesting that she does it only visually. It starts with the main cliche that we all have that is a misinterpreted idea of Marie Antoinette. It's her sitting with a cake next to her.
Right.
And that's before the movie even starts.
Right. Right.
And she's just kind of looking at you, almost daring you. Like she's got this sort of like rebel look on her face, staring at the camera, and she's just got this cake next to her.
Right.
And you got this kind of punk rock song in the background.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, this is not going to be your typical Marie Antoinette movie. Like, and then, you just watch,
Right, yeah. And then, the pink letters on the black, just like this propulsive sort of energy, automatically informs us who this character is going to be, what sort of story we're going to be told. And then she plays with that by, like, pulling it all the way back to Marie being just pretty much a silent bystander in her own future for a while. And I don't want to get too far into things and theories and philosophies about this movie, but I just kind of want to start at that point, that her point of view is what makes this movie. Her ability to articulate that, her ability to draw that out in Marie Antoinette is why I think this movie succeeds as well as it does.
And I think that Sofia Coppola, in her own life, has a sort of unique ability to sympathize with a character like Marie Antoinette, being from a family like the Coppolas, where there's a lot of pressure in that family, especially if she's deciding to go into film, about living up to that. And then I was reading, there was an article where the person who wrote the book Marie Antoinette, her name is Antonia Fraser, she just talks about her experience with working with Sofia Coppola to develop the film, and she talked about how Sofia Coppola actually said to her, that, quote, my mother would like me to have a baby, but I would like to have another film. Like, so she was almost struggling with what Marie Antoinette's ultimate struggle was as she was making this movie, that like her own parents wanted her to do the whole, family mother thing, and she really wanted to do what she wanted to do, which was her real love of making a film.
Yeah.
And of course, being a Coppola. And,
right.
Almost being like I don't want to say royalty, but like,
No, I mean, cinema royalty.
Yeah, sure.
Certainly. And if I can bring in the Godfather 3 thing that I was thinking of.
Sure.
Part of what Marie Antoinette deals with so constantly is everyone's expectations of her and everyone's path for her and the shitstorm she has to deal with if she doesn't live up to those expectations.
Yep. Yeah, could you think of a better analogy than
Sofia Coppola acting in Godfather 3? Like, sorry, I've never said I was an actor. Like, by all accounts, Winona Ryder backed out at the last moment. My dad just said, here, you do it. And sorry it wasn't what you expected. Sorry it didn't live up to your expectations.
You'd like to make me the scapegoat for ruining the entire trilogy of The Godfather.
Right, which she didn't. The Godfather 3 had many problems on its own.
It's not that good of a movie.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, of course Marie Antoinette's a perfect character for Sofia Coppola to tell the story of. She knows what it's like to be just thrust into the public eye naked, basically. Like, here, like, be a major role in this movie that everybody is counting on to be as good as these monuments of movies.
And thrust in by her family.
By her family, right. And I thought, like, she knew what Marie Antoinette was going through. Like, she gets letting down an entire country. And
which also could explain why, once you make the choice to bring in the modern music as an anachronism, like that she's actually choosing music from probably that period of her life. It's a lot of 80s new wave, and stuff that was probably her coming of age soundtrack. You know?
Yeah. I don't know how personal this movie is, but I feel like if Sofia Coppola said it's incredibly personal, I would say I
makes a lot of sense.
Get that.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we maybe talk about where you felt a little meh about the first time, what this time around maybe landed better for you, I guess, or maybe with a little bit more perspective now, going back and watching it was like, oh, this really does fit in with what she's doing,
Well, I think just knowing what to expect, knowing the arc of it better, because I was hoping for it to be punk rock all the way and like a big middle finger to the historical dramas.
Sure.
But it definitely it follows a lot, it kind of slides into the feel every now and then. This time watching it, I was like, well, that's obviously, maybe not. In my interpretation, that's obviously the times where Marie is being stifled by the rules.
When it feels more like a traditional period piece.
Right.
That's when the classical music comes in.
Right, when she gets, at their wedding is when the classical music starts. Like up until that point, it had been, even the original music had been more modern.
Right. It was like a little plucky electric guitars and things like that, yeah.
And then she gets married, or even before that, her dog gets taken away. And then the classical music starts.
The wedding itself, actually, there's no score, and it's interesting because there's like just like sounds of birds in the background. Sounds, yep. It's kind of it's an interesting choice in itself. There's a lot of just silence even in it.
Yep.
Well,
it's a pretty awkward.
It's awkward, and it makes you sit in that awkwardness.
Yep.
And then when it does,
you really feel for it. Like it's just creating this empathy. Because credit to Kirsten Dunst, she's not playing it like she hates it. She's really giving it a go.
Well, there's so much resolve in her, I feel like. She understands.
She knows what she has to do. And she's like, all right, I'm going to do it. And nobody's meeting her halfway.
Right.
So I guess to call the silence awkward is almost underplaying it, because the silence is really loneliness.
That's true. It's more of a loneliness.
Nobody's meeting her halfway. She gave up her dog. She gave up everything, every thread that belonged to her home country. And so when she met Louis, when she met everybody, she was going for it. And then the silence is all that meets her.
Right. And then right after that is when the classical music kicks in. And it's done in a way that's, I laughed. I think it's supposed to be humorous. The dance that they do is so stiff and so distant. And honestly, it just highlights the absurdity of all the ceremony. It's like when she goes full period piece, it's almost like a statement in itself of how dry this is, and how ceremonious it is.
That's what I noticed more this time. And not only is there sort of a humor to it, an absurdity to it, there's also a real oppressiveness to it. As soon as she is set on this course, the framing of Marie is just so tight and suffocating. You've got her in her carriage on the way to it. The walls are just like filling in most of the screen. And when she walks up to Versailles for the first time, the people are so tight in the walkway that she's got to go. And then the dance, they've got like a very small amount of dance floor. It's not,
and everyone's
it's
just
Beauty
watching.
and the Beast.
It's
with
not
this dazzling like camera flying around this massive room.
It's also not a ball. Everyone else treats this like it's just a spectator
thing. They're just watching. Yeah.
In the wedding night, like the bed is very confined and people are crowded around it. And,
that the visuals that she's doing, you feel the eyes, you feel how confined she is.
It's a big juxtaposition between the second half of the movie where she's given her chateau and it's all pastoral,
right?
And so much more open.
Wearing her corset,
right? And when she does go to the masquerade ball and everyone's having a good time, and that's the modern music again.
Yep.
And what I noticed is it wasn't just a lazy, I'm going to put modern music in where it fits and I'm going to put classical music where it fits. Like there's a point to it. Like she is free when it's playing modern music or when she's more herself,
Right.
So even in the scenes where it's not all about the parties and all that stuff, when it's more just when the viewer is kind of just alone with her, even if it's not like the most poppy punky kind of stuff, it's like the more modern ambient, score type stuff,
And I think just watching it once or watching it not very closely, it could feel a little obvious. Like, oh, okay.
If her song choices weren't so spot on.
Right. I know. But the more you look into it, the more you see, like, this is so intentional and so perfect. There's no cynicism to her modern. It's just so genuine and so true to the character and true to the movie.
I don't sense that it's the kids will love this.
Right. No.
At all. This is...
And there were even times, and I should have noted them, but there were times where I was like, oh man, this song lyrically is really poignant. I should actually watch this again, like reading the lyrics to the song. So I think a lot of the critics said like, yeah, she gave it a shot trying to modernize it. Good for her.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's not just she did it so well.
Well, here's okay. I'm going to tread softly here.
Okay.
I'll preface this by saying we both love Wes Anderson. Okay. So
yeah,
but that's another director that often gets cited as someone who uses soundtrack and songs very well. Not to detract at all from what he does, but I kind of feel like Sofia Coppola doesn't get mentioned enough in those conversations.
You're probably right.
Because she should,
Jesus and Mary Chain in Lost in Translation, and
her use
Roxy
of
music and
her
Lost
use
in
of
Translation.
And there's a song.
I mean, we already said Air and the Virgin Suicides.
Air and Virgin Suicides, but there's also a song from Talkie Walkie from Air and Lost in Translation when she's in the Tokyo monastery. It's the Alone in Kyoto song. I mean, it's a perfect track for that moment. And along with her framing and her actual filmmaking, it makes her movies feel so youthful and cool, and you just want to go back to them. I mean, I almost want to go back to them just to listen to those songs again in those settings. You know, the difference I want to strike between someone who uses music like Wes Anderson and someone like Sofia Coppola is that also in both of their movies they get, there's such a precision and a style to their movies. So there is a lot of similarities there, but hers feel so light, I think, in the way that like they never feel labored at all. And I think a lot of directors, I don't know about Wes Anderson, but a lot of directors strive for that, but never quite achieve it. Like there's just this controlled lightness to her stuff. Like it's so precise and it's so thought out to the finest detail, which is something that a lot of people talk about Wes Anderson for too, about like how every little thing seems to be in the right place. I think you could totally say that about Marie Antoinette. And especially when the way she pulls off this Rococo style. Yes. I mean, especially that first time.
Of course, shooting in Versailles helps.
Of course. But they also talked about in the DVD special effects that just covered the exteriors. Right. All the interiors had to be redesigned, like all the furniture, all the food. Because, they couldn't use any of that
food,
stuff.
Right. Yeah, the food and the shoes.
There's such a precision to what she has, but it still had this feeling of levity.
That's
to
her
it.
taste.
It's weightless,
that's her taste. That's her coolness that we were talking about.
That's not to say she's a better filmmaker than Wes Anderson. I just think that she doesn't get the same level.
She's so underappreciated.
Yes, exactly.
Because you watch it and it couldn't have been any other way. And so you watch it and you think, well, obviously. But no, not obviously. Like she did that so well that it makes it that you couldn't imagine it another way.
Well, and if you doubted that was the case, if you watch some of the special features on the DVD where they're interviewing the set designers, they'll talk about how she would come to them with these pictures, and the pictures had no relation. It was like a picture. I saw this picture of this scarf, and I like that color. So can you put this color on that chair? And and then she talked about how period pieces use a lot of reds and purples and things to give it a more royal feel. And she's like, I want all that gone. I want pastels. I want yellows. I want blues. I want, and then when you get to the more stuffy scenes, you actually see that's where she brings in a little bit more of the sepia tones and the reds and the darkness and the more Baroque kind of look to it.
Well, and Dubarry is always wearing that
like red dress,
lush red. Yeah. And she so specifically picked the baker to create all the foods and the shoe designer to create all the shoes. Like she knows what she wants. Here's why I think people thought her soundtrack was cute, gimmicky. Partly could be sexism. It's always a possibility. As far as her being underappreciated, people just, that was a nice, good, Sophia.
Round of applause.
I'm going to say sexism played into it, but you also have to remember what movie came out the year before, and everybody was praising its soundtrack. I believe that probably people were a bit, after Garden State, a bit fatigued from
twee kind of
yes, directors handpicking their playlist. Garden State was a playlist that Zach Braff made and a movie that Zach Braff made.
And to hear more of our take on that, there's an archived episode.
Go back to our episode. Yeah. And so people couldn't necessarily. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt and giving them a reason, not just being Philistines and not understanding Sofia Coppola's vision, but they probably, I mean, it could be easy to hear an out of place or an interesting soundtrack and think, oh, this person's trying to whatever, just show us what they like, be impressive by being, she would be by being retro, like all these things.
Like you can't just slap a new song on a period piece and think you're doing something interesting. Right. Kind of that sort of take,
Right. So I think that like, if you think back to that time, soundtracks and curated soundtracks like that were kind of like this big thing. And Wes Anderson too. I remember it would have been several years before, but I mean, Rushmore, Royal Tenenbaums. So I feel like that could be a reason why people saw what she did and just were like, oh, okay, this is what people are doing now. But true to Sofia Coppola's form, no, she's not doing what people are doing now. She's doing what people should be doing and will be doing in 10 years. Mm-hmm. Quick side note, another thing that Sofia Coppola was 10 years ahead on is gray hair as a fashion for women. And on top of that, this is the first historical movie costuming where I was like, they look really cool.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like, that's really impressive and ornate, but like when she wears that first light blue dress with like the blue hat and her hair, the styling of her hair, I'm like, yeah, I think people should wear that.
Right.
Like that looks cool.
I feel like the costuming itself was so integrated into the vision. Whereas I feel like with a lot of historical pieces, you've got a director that basically says, let's hire a good costume designer.
That costumer does something
does
flashy.
What they do.
Yep.
And I don't need to worry about it.
Right.
This feels like everything down to the costuming and even maybe even the buttons on the costume, whatever.
Who knows?
Was hand selected, or at least sort of fulfilling a very specific vision of Sofia Coppola's, because those costumes don't feel out of place with the modern music. Right. Like it feels like these are hipsters.
That's the same
These
person.
Are cool people.
Right.
It's a whole package deal with Marie Antoinette, because if all the pieces didn't interlock so well, it would all fall apart.
And the closer you look, the more linked they are.
And it especially would fall apart. This is something else that I want to bring up that I really appreciate about the movie is, I watch movies that we're going to be recording a little differently because I need to be thinking about what clips are we going to use. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm going to do for clips for this movie because there's no dialogue hardly in this movie.
Well, one thing,
the dialogue is like one or two sentences, but so much is unspoken. It's all visual. It's all body language,
which is another
which we can't really talk too much about in the podcast. You have to see the movie,
right?
But it's so much body language. It's so much pacing and silence. And when it's not silence, it's the music and other things other than spoken dialogue that are telling you what you should be thinking about the scene, what you should be thinking about what the characters are experiencing.
And how good is Kirsten Dunst in this movie?
Really good. And I don't think when the movie came out, anyone was really looking for that.
No. If they were looking for a traditional, historical acting role. Like, where was her breakdown scene? Where was her moment of like power? And they're there. Her breakdowns and her powerful scenes are there, but they're so subtle. And her face when she's just trying,
especially when she's trying to get, her husband to have sex with her.
Those scenes could have been played for laughs, and they're sort of funny. They could have been played way more tragically, but really, they're just sort of like a girl who's just like, I don't know. I'm trying. I'm doing my best.
It's cold.
It is a bit chilly. Shall I get you a blanket?
No.
Woohoo! Are those your feet? They're like icicles.
Mm.
Well, sleep well.
Thank you. Night.
Good night.
I actually find Jason Schwartzman's performance
Well,
really
I was
funny.
going to say,
and-
I don't know who else you could have gotten because Jason Schwartzman is so good at those subtle visual. Like, there's that scene that we could play the clip where she says, "I hear you make keys."
Such a good.
So, I've heard you make keys as a hobby?
Yes.
And you enjoy making keys?
Obviously.
And to hear it, it may be sort of funny, but to see it, it's like hilarious just
Yeah.
because of the way Jason Schwartzman does it.
He has
but
a
it's
way of-
also
yeah.
heartbreaking because of the way that you're like, oh,
like
that's
she's
definitely-
trying
she's
here.
Trying.
She's trying.
Yeah.
He has such a good way of. It's not just bringing awkwardness to a scene. It's a condescending awkwardness.
Yeah.
Even though, and what's really complex
but also
about
a
Jason
really
Schwartzman,
insecure.
but you
awkwardness.
also get a sense that he kind of does really have an affection towards her. He
Yes.
just doesn't really know how to express it. Like
Right.
there,
How could he? He's 14.
He is like joyously showing her new piece of property.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it comes out of him, not out of obligation, not out of oh fine, I know you've been wanting this. It's like I'm so happy to
Yeah.
give this to you.
No, that's
because
the
I
thing.
really do like you.
You really do get the sense that they like each other. Maybe they're like great friends, or more like brother and sister. But like, there's definitely affection there, and it's not again. Yeah, but it's so complex. But also the whole cast: Molly Shannon, Steve Coogan, Rip
Yes.
Torn,
Yeah.
like all these people.
Danny Houston was
Right.
great as the brother.
Yeah. Mary Ann Faithfull as her mother. You would not typically put in a studio historical drama, but it comes alive because of them. Now, that reminds me of something else that I really liked about the movie this time, and it has to do, because we haven't talked about every aspect of filmmaking that Sofia Coppola had control over. The sound design does such a good job of demonstrating gossip as the currency of the court. You can't quite hear things, you catch snippets of it, but there are scenes where that's the only dialogue, is people whispering.
You know, everyone, Countess tonight looks very out of sorts.
I think her husband has been causing a little problem lately. Spending far too much time with his stable boys.
Too much. Marie Antoinette looks very pretty tonight.
Yes.
Darling, I know life, unfortunately. When you think about this poor Marie Antoinette, so young, I think she should go back to her country. So disgusting.
And the Countess is looking rather down this evening, don't you think?
Always dour. Always tragic.
Always ghastly, aren't
You're kind of leaning in, trying to catch what they're hearing, and then you realize you're just never going to hear it.
Right.
But you catch pieces of it, like you said. It is really effective.
Yeah.
And you catch what you need to hear.
And just that's just another example of how she immerses you in a way that no other historical drama, I think, does.
Yeah.
Because really, what she ends up doing is making Versailles a high school. She sort of subtly, and maybe not so subtly, equates the decorum of court with the weird social, you
Cliques and
can't
things,
sit
yeah.
here. No, we don't wear that on these days
yeah.
of high school. Now, another interesting thing this time that I noticed was once Marie becomes queen, once Louis XV dies, Louis XVI, everything's a little bit messier. There's a lot less symmetry to the shots. Hair is like out of place. Costumes are kind of out of place. There's one shot specifically where a servant picks up a plate to like move it, and there's like food spilled on the table. Everything about Marie's rule is a little messy.
Yeah, and you also get the sense that like, and it's only needed with one line where they just say, "We are too young to rule." That's all you need to know, and it kind of sets you on course for that whole second act.
Yeah.
That these are rulers who really didn't know what to do with their power. You know?
There's a ton of energy that's given to that once she becomes queen and kind of starts doing whatever. But there's also a real, like, palpable uncertainty. And inevitability. Instead of maybe showing us the uprising, she just shows us how flimsy the foundation of the monarchy was at that point. We don't fault Marie for it. We're like, well, yeah, you've wanted to break free so long. You've been forced into this position. We want you to find yourself and to express yourself. But then you kind of start to see how that's going to be her downfall.
Yeah. Almost like the partying and the decadence was sort of like a self-defense mechanism. Like it's what worked for her. She figured out that like if she could just do this, it would make her feel
It was how
comfortable
she
in
got
her
control.
skin. Yeah.
It was kind of interesting. The movie does step in to some historical things, like putting to rest the idea that Marie Antoinette ever said, "Let them eat cake."
Right. Which was, I thought, done really well.
Yeah.
You know, like with
the fantasy, like witch queen.
Yes. Yeah. She's got the black lipstick on, and the way she says it is almost like I can't be bothered with this right now.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Then it just jumps to her, and she's like, I would never say something like that. And you, as the viewer, were like, yeah, you're right. You would never say something like that.
The Marie we know
Like,
wouldn't. Yeah.
There's an interview with Steve Coogan on the DVD where he kind of talks about his interpretation of Marie Antoinette.
Right.
And he basically just says she's one of the first victims of PR problems, really. And I think that's kind of, you know, whether you agree historically with that or not, that is definitely the take of the movie, was that that she really wasn't so bad. She was put into a circumstance where she didn't really know what to do.
Wrong time.
Yeah. And you had mentioned the sound design, which we should talk about, you know, the obvious fact that Coppola really doesn't seem to want to talk about the French Revolution at all. That's going on outside Versailles the entire time.
Right.
But I actually found it so effective that she didn't, and that the first sense you get of it is while you're in Versailles, and it's through sound design, you're just hearing the mobs, you know, and it's actually so much more horrific, I think.
Yep.
Save the queen, madam. They're coming to kill her.
Celine, don't be frightened. Let's get the children.
It actually, I think, also helps with the feeling of what the movie's trying to say about her character.
Exactly.
And the insulation of her character is like, whether that's true to history or not, it conveys the idea so effectively that this was something that she was very separate from, that was happening outside of Versailles. It was not part of her world.
But what you also get a sense of is that they were very separate from her experience. They didn't understand her either.
Right.
Which... is there validity? There's some validity to that. Does it mean they shouldn't have revolted? Probably not. Does it mean they shouldn't have killed her?
I don't think she's making that statement. There's nothing about the movie where Coppola's saying the French Revolution, you know, was wrong or right or whatever.
But it's something you don't think of.
Yeah.
You don't think of. You never think of like well, do you know what it's like to be king?
Right.
or queen or whatever.
The interesting thing is, if you were going to make a movie, you know, if I was going to make a movie, someone said, I want you to make a sympathetic Marie Antoinette movie.
Yeah.
I would come at it knowing the French Revolution, and I would say, well, what we have to do is show that she really wasn't as extravagant as everyone thinks she is.
Right.
No, not at all.
That's not what,
you know, Sofia Coppola says,
overspending.
no, she was extremely extravagant, no spared expense.
Right.
Crazy parties, you know, really doesn't seem all that concerned with who she's supposed to be ruling over. We're just going to take that as a fact, you know? In this world, the French Revolution almost came as a blindside. Like, we didn't see that coming. And the fact that she can still have you sympathize with a character that was insulated within a bubble, was that just privileged, and see her as a character through that, and actually have sympathy for her when the pitchforks and the mobs start coming, even though you know they have really legitimate reasons to be angry, you know.
And it's a really moving scene when she goes out on the balcony, because from what we know of her, that's genuine humility.
Yeah.
That is that's not just a show, that admission that I had no idea, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. And that she also is almost in that admitting that she didn't know it was that bad. She can't say she didn't know it, because there was a scene earlier where it's not the cake scene, but there is a scene where the Steve Coogan ambassador character is kind of saying, this is turning into a real problem. And her best solution, because she's so removed from everything, is, we can have less diamonds. Like in her mind, she's thinking, we should do this. This is, we really need to help these people. There's something we can do, right? And that's just within her world. That's the best she can come up with.
Right.
And it's so naive.
Mm-hmm.
I think Coppola has enough faith in her audience to say, what's going to happen.
Right.
You know how this ends, without having to actually tell you what happens, or to actually tell you the weight of what's going on outside Versailles.
Or the events that lead up to what we know is going to happen. Yeah. This may be the scene you were talking about when you were talking about the sound design of hearing the people at Versailles before, but I'm thinking of that dinner scene.
Yeah.
And
it's like one last ceremony, pretty much.
Yeah. That was almost a little microcosm for her world, where the dinner, the decorum of it is so clearly absurd. And it's kind of funny in that moment. But it's also really sad. But overall, it's really just moving and doomed. And that's sort of basically the story of Marie Antoinette. Like there's some, at least in this movie, it's kind of funny. But also, if you start thinking about it, it's really sad.
Yeah, yeah.
But no matter what, she's just a very moving character, in part because she's doomed.
Mm-hmm.
And the life she lived was never her life. And when she was trying to live the life she wanted to live, she just caught shit from everybody for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, rightly or wrongly. She was really opulent. And again, that brings us back to the Godfather 3. Like,
right.
Sofia Coppola, she was just doing what she did.
But you also get the sense...
She caught a lot of shit for it.
You get the sense,
rightly or wrongly. It's a terrible performance. It really is.
It is. But you also... Okay, so go with that, actually. If you look at when she's really kind of... There's two sides to when Marie Antoinette is living the sort of free life. There's the side that's full of the parties and the extravagance and all the expenses. There's also the side of going back to nature and living on the chateau and feeding the lambs. And they're like quoting Rousseau.
And she's a good mother.
Right. And you get the sense that if she was given the chance or in a different environment, she would have understood the plight of the people.
Right.
That she would have seen things. She would have been a person of the Enlightenment.
That also helps you understand why she would be blindsided by the revolution.
Because she was
as somebody who believes in Rousseau. Yeah. But like Rousseau, like at their core, people are going to have compassion.
Yeah.
So the idea of a revolution doesn't happen really in Rousseau's world. So
we just got to all get back to nature, and we would all be great if we would just do that.
Right.
So there's kind of two versions of that free Marie Antoinette, and there's so much richness to that. I mean, we could probably spend a lot of time just digging into those two sides and how they seem contradictory,
right?
But that in the movie they fit together so well, and that we probably all have that to a certain degree in us.
So Marie Antoinette's primarily the story of a teenage girl growing up in a world that constantly burdens her with their expectations and their assumptions about her. So, I mean, it's basically the story of every girl ever, like, burdened with expectations and assumptions that they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. But this girl happens to be the Queen of France. It's sort of a story that Sofia Coppola has told a couple times in The Virgin Suicides and Lost in Translation. Virgin Suicides, we've got 5 sisters who are burdened with expectations from all sides. Their parents expect them to be good Catholic girls. They're
very beautiful in school.
Their high school boy classmates expect them to be sexual beings, but also virginal. In Lost in Translation, Charlotte is expected to be happy. You've got this good life. You've got a successful director or photographer husband. Slip of a tongue there. I think that movie is about Sofia Coppola and Spike Jonze. So he was a director. But
But yeah, you're right. And,
essentially,
and she gets to travel the world, and
right. And what do you have to be sad about? I either saw Lost in Translation right after high school, like the summer after high school, whatever. But I was talking to my high school drama teacher right after I saw it, and she was like, "I don't know. It's kind of tough to be sympathetic for this character who has unlimited money and unlimited time to explore Japan and feel sad for him." I'm like, you don't know. They're sad.
Right.
What can you say? Like, that's part of what she's saying in all these movies, these 3 movies. You can be lonely in a crowded room.
Right.
Like there's nothing that demands your happiness.
Right.
Nothing that demands you don't feel lonely.
Right.
And so we've got this in the Virgin Suicides. The Lisbon sisters, they aren't taken seriously because from the outside, what do they have to be sad about?
Right.
They've got a good house. They go to a good school. They've got loving parents, an intact family. They're popular, all these things. There's just this mockery of their sadness and no understanding for them. There's a line in Virgin Suicides that I think could kind of be like an important unlocking line in all of those three movies, where Danny DeVito's cameo as like the psychiatrist for Cecile, the youngest sister, tries to commit suicide, and so she's like in this hospital, and he says, "What are you doing here, honey? You're not even old enough to know how bad it gets." And she says, "Obviously, doctor, you've never been a 13-year-old girl." And I feel like that's what Sofia Coppola is sort of saying, like, you don't know what it's like. You can't tell these characters they can't be sad. You can't tell them that there's like
that they're not entitled to human emotion because they have wealth or because they come from a privileged, position. Not so much in Lost in Translation, but especially in Virgin Suicides and Marie Antoinette, these are people of, seeming privilege who didn't have any choice being there. So whether that's poverty or privilege, I think the lack of choice and the lack of autonomy and the lack of like really feeling free is the real problem. And if that's a universal problem, no matter what your circumstance is. So I feel like that's where anybody can sympathize with these characters, even if you can get past the fact of like, I cannot imagine feeling sorry for someone who has it all.
Right.
Well, if you understand that even when you have it all, you don't often have it all.
And I think that's why Coppola's depiction of Marie is so vital and unique, because Coppola knows girls, and she definitely knows a girl who has it all, and I'm assuming isn't totally happy with it.
Yeah.
So basically, that's why I feel like this story has so much life and so much richness.
And it's the struggle, also a universal struggle, one that all women share, which is going from girlhood to womanhood, which is really the period that she seems to be very focused on in a lot of her movies. And you see that in Virgin Suicides. You see it a little bit older with the Charlotte character in Lost in Translation, but she is using
from
Bill
like school to adulthood,
right?
Almost,
and she's using almost like the Bill Murray character to get some perspective,
right?
Like, tell me if it gets better.
I want to note here, I have never heard anybody say that Bill Murray's character shouldn't be sad,
even though he's got just as much money and
if not more.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
and
it's a good
respected career and is loved everywhere he goes.
Yeah, it's okay if a male
is
successful but feels empty inside.
Right.
But as soon as a woman is successful and feels empty inside,
stop whining.
Well, I think I feel like what we're saying, it seems like we're both saying that it's so limiting to say it's a unique take on period pieces.
Oh, yeah.
It's a unique take on femininity.
Absolutely.
It's a voice that we don't see very often in film, sadly,
Right.
And that's why I think it actually is way more of a special movie than we give credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. Because while the courtly expectations, those are long gone. But the societal expectations that girls have are all too real. And no less stifling.
And there's a lot in this movie that still lends a lot of weight to that conversation about what it means to be a woman in the spotlight even. One last thing I appreciate, maybe we'll have a little bit of time for things we didn't like, although I don't know that I have a whole lot. But,
it's pretty inconsequential.
I was really with this movie and I was so worried about the ending letting me down. And it totally does not.
No, I was going to say.
I love the
final
ending
shot
to this movie. Like, I love the final shot is amazing. Just the bedroom destroyed. That's all you need.
Yep.
Like, it's so devastating.
Yep.
And, it's devastating without even showing a character. Like, it's just a set piece that's destroyed and it says everything. But before that, the way Kirsten Dunst plays Marie Antoinette in the carriage as they're driving, as they're being taken. And when the way she says, "I'm saying goodbye," it's heartbreaking.
Yep.
It's perfect. It also just shows how strong she is. The sort of resignation to it, almost like it's not overdone. It's not overplayed. It's not super sad or tragic.
It's kind of a whiplash of an ending. I'm saying goodbye is a nice euphemism. It could be interpreted various ways. And then that final shot is like, there was no peace to this. she was maybe making peace, she was doing whatever, but it was really tragic for her and really violent and really shocking and just a destroyed room.
No need to show a guillotine
Right.
or anything like that.
No
like
final march, no like... No,
which is all the trappings of a historical period
no
piece. Because
big,
they're going to really
final
play up
moment
that.
for Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about in this movie how she leaves out the French Revolution, but I think it's almost more telling that they leave out her execution entirely.
And that could be her deification.
Yeah.
If they did it, if
Right.
they wanted to.
If they wanted to make her a savior figure, that's
Like,
where you do it. You
that's-
show her just steely resolve going up to the guillotine and,
Right.
you know...
These like
becoming
spitting,
a-
sneering peasants,
yes,
like
and,
whatever. Yeah.
You know, it's a much quieter and in a lot of ways more powerful ending to that movie that I think is just pitch perfect with the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's got it's a really interesting bookend to the opening shot.
With her in the bathtub.
Right. Like almost this fantasy picture of her, this unrealistic portrait of her, and then this very realistic broken room, and both just single shots outside of anything that came before or after.
Mm-hmm. So anyways, yeah.
Do you think... I feel like there's no reason for me not to move it up to at least a 4.5.
Yeah. I think after talking with you about it, and especially some of the stuff you brought out, I mean, I really do think, I mean, it was a really special viewing experience for me. I really enjoyed watching it, and it hits all the marks for me. You know, I'm a sucker for historical period pieces, and I actually like what she did with it, as opposed to being like, this isn't the period piece I'm used to. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It wasn't just, you know, mischievous.
Yeah. I think I'm going to put it up to a 5-star. I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Other than it just makes me look
if...
like I love everything on this podcast, which
No,
I hated a very Murray Christmas special. We'll put that on the record.
Okay, that's true. That was on the record. All right. Well, I mean, clearly we're best buds on this.
Yeah. Good talk.
That is good. If you haven't seen this movie, definitely see it. If you have seen it, but it's been a while, no matter what, watch this movie again.
Yeah. And we didn't get any feedback on this episode beforehand, which makes me think a lot of people
underseen and underappreciated movie.
It. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think we can stress enough.
Maybe when we put this episode out there, we're really going to have to say like, watch this movie, even if you don't listen to our podcast. Yeah. You need to watch this movie. Because it's great and criminally underappreciated.
I agree, and I am very excited now to see the Beguiled.
Whitewashing and all.
All right. So best buds it is. Why don't we go ahead and talk about what we're going to discuss in our next episode of Can't We Still Be Friends?
So for our next episode, we're doing something brand new, which is...
I'm a little scared of this.
You're scared? Right now I'm really excited.
Okay, well, I'm scared, excited.
I'm looking forward to this, and I maybe shouldn't be. It's never been done before on this podcast. I don't know if it's been done on another podcast. We can't say. Maybe it's a bad idea.
But we don't be a disaster.
We don't care. We don't even know how we're going to do this exactly. We
know it involves watching
2 movies.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a double feature. We're doing a double feature, a double anniversary double feature.
Not the same year, though.
No, not
just
the same year.
Double milestones.
So we've got a movie 1992, 25 years ago, 1997, 20 years ago. We are going to be doing a Mike Myers double feature. Don't know why. Just because of the anniversary. We saw both these movies as anniversaries. It's summertime. This is when you watch these movies.
It's going to be fun.
We're going to watch Wayne's World, and we're going to watch Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. Now, what connects them?
Mike Myers.
Mike Myers.
Yeah.
And anniversaries. So that is what we're going with right now. When we talk, hopefully we'll have something a little bit more cohesive.
Right.
Maybe we won't.
But we don't know if we're going to talk about one movie than the other one.
But you know who else had no regard for the rules? Wayne.
And Garth.
And Austin Powers.
This is the thing about both of those movies.
Go for it.
I'd have to dig a little deep into the recesses of my mind.
Yeah.
But as I watch these movies, I will probably be able to quote them from beginning to end as I'm watching them. I will know every single line in these movies. That's how...
I'll probably be surprised at how much I rember about Austin Powers.
That's how much of an impact we forget Mike Myers had.
Oh my gosh.
On us growing up.
Yeah.
Because he really, he's for whatever reason, I haven't seen a Mike Myers new movie.
For whatever reason... started making horrible movies.
Well, that's the reason. I was trying to be nice. You just went there.
You know what happened? Shrek happened.
Well, okay, that's a good hypothesis.
He should have checked himself. before he Shrek'd himself. So expect this level of discourse when we do our Mike Myers double feature.
If you hit up your library or maybe just ask around, these should not be hard movies to find.
No. Or if you find enough friends, you could probably act them out.
I would say it's possible that I brought new depth to Mike Myers' performance in these movies when I acted them out as an 8th grader.
Sure. I can
I brought that
imagine.
8th grade sensibility.
Yeah.
We really emphasized the fart jokes, especially in Austin Powers. There's fart jokes in Austin Powers. A little bit of toilet humor, right?
There's a little bit of toilet humor. I think there's
Who does Mr. 2 work for?
I
remember
there's
that.
A touch of toilet humor. I feel like
a tinge.
I feel like perhaps there's maybe a 5-minute
There's
scene
sort of
on
like
a toilet.
brush strokes of toilet humor.
I feel like there's there are these
Accents.
these grace notes. Yeah, this will be good. Maybe.
Well, we'll see. We've never done
I'm
this
excited.
before.
Are you less scared now that we've kind of...
Here's the thing. I am not scared at all about watching these movies. I'm going to have a blast watching these movies. Although I was
Maybe you
saying
won't.
before that these
Maybe
might
you
not
won't.
have aged very well.
Maybe you won't.
And what I'm more worried about is how the podcast is going to go. Like, how are we going to actually pull this off? Discussing both without confusing ourselves. Wait, are you talking about Austin Powers? Or are you talking about Wayne? Like, Austin Powers didn't say Party Time Excellent. That didn't happen, Ryan. You're getting them confused.
Yeah. Boy, you're right. This could get dicey.
There's 2 things I want to mention. One is I want to welcome all of our new listeners from the Philippines.
We've got hundreds of people. At least they like us on Facebook.
Tons of people from the Philippines.
Filipino teenagers
started liking our Facebook page. And part of me thought it was, some sort of like spam kind of thing going on. But then we realized this year.
Yep.
I haven't seen it, but supposedly there is a very popular teen movie
in the
from
Philippines
the Philippines called Can We Still Be Friends?
Yeah.
It came out June 23rd. But I think there must have been a lot of hype to it because
it seems like it.
We were
getting likes real early.
And we had people on Twitter, I think, who were like
mentioning
us or mentioning our podcast, thinking that we were the movie.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping if any of you people from the Philippines decided to listen to our podcast, maybe we brought in some new listeners.
Thank you. Yeah.
So welcome. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely welcome. Those likes keep I don't know. They do something for us.
And maybe, who knows, because it looks like we're in the mood to try whatever on this podcast at this point. But, hopefully, maybe when it comes out on DVD, Blu-ray, we will talk about Can We Still Be Friends? I think we have to.
I feel like if there's a way for us to watch it, we should do that movie.
So this is all the synopsis is for Can We Still Be Friends, the movie. It's just, after splitting up, a couple struggles to detach their lives from one another.
Nate, that's our story.
It's true.
They stole that.
The other thing I want to mention quickly is in the last episode, we talked about how you pronounced Francis Ford Coppola,
right?
Or Coppola, as you sort of threw.
I've just heard it.
I've
just
heard it. If you've listened to this episode, obviously we've been saying Coppola the entire time
because we cracked the mystery. We cracked the case.
We kind of did. After our recording. Well, hear me out here. After our recording, we kind of, what did we watch? Like it was like a Coppola wine commercial or something or interview where they pronounced it Coppola, and we were like, oh, that pretty much settles it.
Wait, that didn't settle it? What extra investigating did you do?
There's a clip of when Francis Ford Coppola or Coppola, who knows, won his Oscar for The Godfather in 1975.
Go on.
There's a clip on YouTube of Goldie Hawn and Robert Wise listing off the nominees. And here's the funny thing. I couldn't make this stuff up. Robert Wise reads the nominees, and he says very clearly, Coppola. Then Goldie Hawn opens the envelope and says, and the winner is Francis Ford Coppola for The Godfather.
Huh.
2 different pronunciations in one scene. So even though I promised in our last episode that we would get down to the bottom of this, I think we're safe to say it's Coppola. I think so, too. It was really hard to find an authoritative source on this. I think the most authoritative we can get is the
one we
wine,
found.
the vineyard.
And you kept looking.
Well, I just wanted to be sure.
Why would his own wine company mispronounce it?
I had a hard time after we found that video last week refinding it again.
Okay.
Real quickly, there's a lot of different ways to reach out to us.
Right.
We've got email, feedback at canwestillbefriends.net.
Facebook, obviously, if you live in the Philippines, you've found us.
Thanks for listening.
Twitter at CWSBF. And we also have voicemail, which is, like Marie Antoinette, criminally underappreciated.
Give us a call. I know people have their Austin Powers impressions.
Oh, my gosh.
Everyone had one. I want to hear it.
I want to hear it. I want to hear those.
I'm just going to say it without any inflection, but if just call and give us a yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby. A party on Dr. Evil.
Yeah.
Dr. Evil.
Come on.
You got a Dr. Evil impression.
Everyone
or you've got a friend who had a Dr. Evil impression. You can do an impression of your friend doing it and how bad they were.
We'll take it. We want to hear it.
That actually may be better.
The number you can call is 847-306-9532.
Say it again.
847-306-9532.
Say it like Austin Powers.
Wait.
Don't
do it.
Don't do it.
That's right. But
oh, man, that made me so scared.
Yeah.
That made me so scared that you were going to do it.
Thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying your summer, and we will catch you next time for our double feature.
Mike Myers,
Wayne's World, and Austin
Dust
Powers.
off those VHS. That made me so scared that you were going to do it.
Well, that number itself makes me horny.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh.
I'm going to cut that.
Okay.
All right. So,